On July 4th, 1776, a single declaration changed the world forever. Standing against the most powerful empire on Earth, 13 small colonies made an impossible choice. We will become a free nation. And now, 250 years later, that decision would go on to change the course of world history. In today's video, we're going to explore why Independence Day began, how the United States was born, and why this day still means so much to Americans even today. In the mid-1700s, the eastern coast of North America was made up of 13 colonies ruled by the British Empire. Places like New York, Virginia, and Massachusetts were all under British control. At the time, the colonists lived under the rule of the King of England. But as the years passed, frustration among the people began to grow. And the biggest reason was taxes. After fighting expensive wars, Britain had fallen deep into debt, and the government decided to make the colonies help pay for it. New taxes were introduced on everyday goods, including sugar, paper, and tea. But there was one major problem. The colonists had no voice in the British Parliament. They had no representation, yet Britain continued taxing them anyway. That's when people began shouting a phrase that would become famous in American history: no taxation without representation. In other words, how can you tax us when we have no say in your government? Tensions continued to rise, and eventually, they would lead to one of the most important turning points in history. In 1773, one of the most famous acts of resistance in American history took place: the Boston Tea Party. Britain had placed a tax on tea, and the colonists were furious. But the people of Boston didn't just protest with words, they took action. Late one night, a group of colonists disguised themselves as Native Americans and secretly boarded British ships in Boston Harbor. Then they grabbed hundreds of chests filled with tea and threw them straight into the ocean. This dramatic protest became known as the Boston Tea Party. To Britain, it was a direct act of defiance. The British government responded with anger, shutting down Boston Harbor and imposing harsh punishments on the colonies. But instead of backing down, the colonists became even more united. What had started as a fight over taxes was now becoming something much bigger. People were beginning to talk about freedom and independence. In 1775, war finally broke out. At the time, the British military was the most powerful fighting force in the world. In comparison, the American colonial army was poorly equipped and badly outmatched. Many soldiers had little training, and there was a serious shortage of weapons and supplies. But despite all of that, the colonists had something powerful on their side: the belief that they were fighting for freedom. And during this moment in history, one key figure emerged: George Washington. He was appointed commander-in-chief of the Continental Army and became the leader of the American fight for independence. The conditions were brutal. Soldiers went hungry. Many suffered through freezing winters without proper clothing or shelter. Some didn't survive, but Washington refused to give up. And then, on July 4th, 1776, one of the most important documents in world history was officially announced: the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence was more than just a document. It contained ideas that were considered revolutionary at the time. All men are created equal, and that every person has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Today, these words may sound familiar, but in the 1700s, they shocked the world, because during that era, kings held absolute power. The idea that ordinary people had natural rights and freedoms was considered radical. One of the key figures behind the Declaration was Thomas Jefferson. When the Declaration was officially announced, America formally declared its independence from Britain. But making the Declaration was only the beginning. The real challenge was still ahead. Britain had no intention of letting the colonies go without a fight. At the time, Britain was a global superpower. It had the world's strongest navy, enormous wealth, and one of the most powerful militaries on Earth. Many people believed the colonies had no chance of surviving a long war against the British Empire. but the Americans resisted far more fiercely than anyone expected. And then, a major turning point changed everything. France decided to support the American colonies. As Britain's longtime rival, France saw an opportunity to weaken the British Empire, so they began helping the American revolutionaries. They provided weapons, money, supplies, and eventually even soldiers and warships. With French support, the momentum of the war slowly began to shift. Then, in 1781, the British suffered a devastating defeat at the Battle of Yorktown. It was the turning point that effectively ended the war. 2 years later, in 1783, Britain officially recognized American independence. At last, a new nation had been born. After gaining independence, Americans began celebrating July 4th as a special day. People gathered in the streets for festivals, held parades, and played music to celebrate the birth of their new nation. And over time, one tradition became especially iconic: fireworks. The bright explosions lighting up the night sky became a symbol of freedom and independence. Even today, massive fireworks shows are held across the United States every Independence Day. Families and friends gather together for barbecues, wave American flags, and celebrate late into the night. Some of the most famous celebrations take place in Washington, D.C. and New York City, drawing millions of people every year. For Americans, July 4th is more than just a holiday. It's the birthday of their nation, a day to celebrate freedom, independence, and the beginning of the United States of America. And now, in 2026, the United States celebrates its 250th anniversary of independence. 250 years. For any nation, that is a remarkable span of history. What began as a group of small colonies has grown into one of the most powerful countries in the world. In economics, military strength, culture, and technology, America has shaped global history in countless ways. But the United States did not begin as a mighty empire. It began with ordinary people who simply wanted freedom. And that's why, for many Americans, Independence Day is more than just a historical celebration. It represents something deeper, a symbol of the American spirit itself. On July 4th, 1776, a group of colonies made a choice that many believed was impossible, even reckless. But that decision would eventually give birth to a new nation and change the course of world history forever. And even 250 years later, America still remembers that moment. Just like the fireworks that light up the night sky every 4th of July, the story of freedom, courage, and independence continues to shine to this day. Happy birthday, America, and happy 250th Independence Day.